Welcome, readers. My name is Neil Christiansen. I'm the author of Dark White and Malcolm Karma Cold Turkey, two edge-of-your-seat noir thrillers set in the corrupt underbelly of Chicago. We're back with the audiobook version of Dark White, and today we're going to be reading Chapter 4. So without further ado, we'll dive in. Chapter 4, March 18th, 2011. 11:38 p.m. State's Attorney Maureen Adalet couldn't sleep. She should have been content in her king-size sleep number bed between 700 thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets. As the newly elected state's attorney for Cook County, she was making a good living, was well respected, and had a loving family. She worked hard to bring order to her corner of society. But her life wasn't what brought her discontent. Anxiety sweat through her pores because Maureen had a teenage daughter, and she was late getting home. Samantha was smart. She was responsible and respectful. But she was also 16 and beautiful, and she had recently earned her driver's license. Tonight, she had used it to drive herself to a party at a friend's house with a promise that the parents would be home and there wouldn't be any drinking. But there was also a promise to be home by 11:30, and it was now 11:38. Maureen didn't want to be one of those parents that got all bent out of shape over 8 minutes. But Samantha wasn't one of those kids that tried to stretch out curfew for just 8 extra minutes. The reason Maureen trusted her to drive to a party at 16 was that Samantha had always given her reason to. 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes and she would call Sam's cell and see what was going on. She stared at the digital clock on her bedstand and suddenly wished it was an analog clock with a third hand. Minutes seemed very long when you didn't have a second hand to follow. 11:39, 11:39, 11:39, 11:40. Maureen reached over to the bedstand and lifted the house phone off of the charger. It rang in her hand. She felt a moment of relief and glanced at the small glowing green screen above the number pad. The caller ID read, Adv. Il. Med. Center. Maureen's heart stopped. She stared at it for a long time. On the 4th ring, she pressed the green button and put the phone to her ear. The voice on the other end of the line had been calm and businesslike. May I please speak with the parent or guardian of Samantha Adalet? Just hearing her baby's name come out of the phone made her start to sob. She let out a wail and tears poured down her cheeks. Her husband sat up next to her, woken by her cry. She was shaking and dropped the phone and the comforter on her lap. What's wrong, sweetheart? He said. He picked up the phone and looked at the screen. His face went white and he put the speaker to his ear. Hello, this is Jason Adalet. Mr. Adalet, this is Rosemary Guile at Advocate Illinois Masonic Medical Center. Are you the parent or guardian of Samantha Adalet? Yes, I'm her father. Mr. Adalet, I have Samantha in our emergency room. She has suffered some injuries. I think it would be best if you came in to see her. What kind of injuries? Is she okay? Was it a car accident? Mr. Adalet, I really can't give that information over the phone. If you could please come into the hospital, we can discuss it in person. But is she okay? He was beginning to sound angry. I'm sorry, sir. I know you are concerned, but I really must insist that you come in and discuss it in person. Maureen didn't remember much until the hospital. Jason got her out of bed and dressed and into the car. They drove the 10 blocks to the hospital in less than 15 minutes. The admitting nurse at the front desk checked their IDs and called another nurse, who led them back to a small curtained-off area where their daughter laid like a rag doll in a hospital bed. Samantha was awake, but something was wrong. She was out of it, spacey. She recognized her parents, but she couldn't maintain focus. Her hair was messed up, her makeup smeared across her face. She had a good-sized cut on her lower lip and dried blood under her nose. Her t-shirt was torn almost completely in half, down the front. Her bra was broken in the middle and hanging off her shoulders, and she didn't have any pants on. The hospital staff explained that she had been found by a passerby, slumped over on the bench at the bus stop at Halstead and Wilmington. The police, who were waiting in the lobby to talk to Maureen and her husband, and to collect Samantha's clothes for evidence, had been called and they transported her to the hospital in their squad car. It was not proper procedure, and technically could have been grounds for reprimand, but they had felt that given the situation, speed trumped procedure, and the hospital staff backed them up on their assessment. A rape kit had been performed, but no semen or vaginal tearing was found. A blood sample had been taken to screen for drugs and alcohol. Her wounds had been treated, and she had been given an IV to get her fluids up, as well as a broad-spectrum antibiotic, just to be on the safe side. Maureen and her husband tried to question Sam about what had happened. Did she know who had done this to her? Was this at the party? How had she gotten to the bus stop? But she was incoherent and sliding in and out of consciousness. Finally, she closed her eyes and went to sleep, and Maureen and Jason went to the lobby to talk to the police. The cops took some information and shared what they knew so far. They got Maureen and Jason's contact information and promised to stay in touch. The next few days were rough. Maureen spent most of the time in the hospital with her daughter. Samantha didn't remember much of what had happened. She swore that she didn't have a drink the whole night. She had been at Marcy's house for the party. There were boys there, but so were Marcy's parents, and there was no alcohol at all. This was backed up by the tox screening that came back from the hospital. No alcohol was found in Samantha's blood, but they did find traces of flunitrazepam. Flunitrazepam, Maureen knew from her job as a prosecutor, was more commonly referred to as Rohypnol, and was often used in drug-facilitated sexual assault, or date rape. There had been no conclusive outward signs that Samantha had been raped. No vaginal tearing or semen found, but the thought that someone had given her Rohypnol in the first place made Maureen sick to her stomach. The worst part was that she had nothing to go on. Everyone at the party had been questioned, and everyone claimed to know nothing. All she could get from Samantha was that she had been spending time with a boy named Kevin Dobson. All of this added up to a slim likelihood of finding out what had happened to her daughter. Maureen was a wreck. She spent her life putting the bad guys behind bars, and now, when her daughter was drugged and turned up battered and beaten, she couldn't do anything to protect her. She felt helpless, and with that came a sense of hopelessness. After a couple weeks, Samantha returned to school. There was a distinct sense of being out of place for her. She told her mom that she felt like an animal in a zoo. Everyone was staring at her, whispering behind her back. A rumor started floating around that she liked rough sex. She was branded a slut by the kids at school and harassed and tormented daily. After a couple weeks of that, Maureen pulled her daughter out and enrolled her in a private academy near their house. Almost a year later, Samantha was starting to piece her life back together. The nightmares had stopped for the most part, and she was starting to spend time with friends again. A boy named Trenton from her old school had started to come by and check on her from time to time. Eventually, they started hanging out, and the word boyfriend started coming up in conversation. Maureen was concerned, but against all statistical probability, he wasn't trying to get her undressed, at least as far as she could tell. They spent afternoons sitting on the couch in the living room and watching TV or playing cards, and he never asked her to be alone with him. It was about 3 weeks from the first mention of the word boyfriend when it happened. Trenton played basketball at the public school. He was good enough to make the team, but far from a star player, which meant he wasn't one of the popular kids. He knew his teammates, but they weren't exactly friends. When practice ended on that late February afternoon, Trenton stayed on the court to practice free throws before the weekend game. When his arm got too sore to throw another, he headed to the locker room to hit the showers. "Oh, shit! No way! Holy fuck, no way!" The voices were hushed but full of energy and laughter. Normally, Trenton ignored this kind of testosterone-fueled male bravado. He loved sports, but he hated the machismo that generally went along with them. He was happy just to get the exercise and call it a day. but something about the way the voices carried gave him a bad feeling. Trenton walked over to the crowd gathered around one guy. It was Kevin Dobson, the captain of the team and a real fucking asshole. They were all watching a video on his phone and laughing. It was a poorly shot video taken with the camera on the phone, dark and shaky. It was hard for Trenton to see what was going on. Then, suddenly everything came into focus. In the middle of the frame was Samantha. She was lying on the grass under a street lamp. A grade school playground was visible behind her. Her pants were around her knees and her t-shirt was ripped down the middle. This was a video of her assault. This was a video of her, barely conscious, being touched and grabbed and handled, and these guys were standing around and laughing at it. Trenton exploded. "What the fuck?" he yelled at the top of his lungs. The laughing stopped. Everything went quiet. Everyone turned and looked at Trenton for a long moment. He could hear the blood pumping behind his ears and the tiny sound coming from the phone. He didn't move. He didn't step. He didn't crouch or lean. He just swung. He swung his right fist hard and wide and made contact with the kid's cheekbone. He felt the boy's face crack under his fist, and he felt the small bones in his hand snap against his chiseled jaw. The boy fell backwards and sideways into a bank of lockers behind him. The phone fell out of his hand and landed face first on the cement floor. Trenton heard the glass shatter on impact. He leaned over and picked up the phone, and without looking back, without changing out of his gym uniform, bolted out of the locker room and straight to his car. He drove a steady 9 miles over the speed limit all the way to Maureen's office, walked past her receptionist and into the afternoon status meeting with the Consumer Fraud Division. Shaking with rage and fear, he walked up to her desk, leaned against it with his left hand, and with his now swollen, broken right hand, placed the phone directly in the center of her desk. In the weeks after that day, Maureen had often wished he had never brought her that phone. She wished that she had never known it existed. The phone confirmed all the worst things that she had feared about that night. That Samantha's trusted friends had betrayed her in unimaginable ways. It proved who the boys involved had been, and, in the end, it was completely unusable. The boys on the video were all arrested. Several of them, including the owner of the phone, Kevin Dobson, made confessions before their lawyers showed up. But in the end, Kevin's lawyer argued that the phone was illegally obtained when Trenton assaulted him and stole it. The phone was deemed inadmissible, and since the confessions were given under duress, they were deemed fruit of the poisonous tree and were thrown out. Ultimately, because of that phone, all of the boys that drugged and tortured her daughter were able to look her in the eyes and walk away. Maureen was crippled with guilt. She grew distant from her family and spent long nights sitting in her office crying. She had failed her family, failed her daughter, failed her job, and failed herself. Eventually, her depression pushed her towards drastic measures. On a cold October evening, Maureen sat in her office on the 32nd floor of her building. Most of her staff had gone home for the evening, and Maureen had been listening to the quiet for some time. She was lost in the silence around her, and it was soothing. It was calming and reassuring. All she wanted was to have this silence forever, to not feel the pain anymore, to not hear the judgment in her family's voices and the ridicule in her colleagues' tone. All she wanted was what she had been unable to give her daughter. She wanted peace. She was slowly spinning the cylinder of a gleaming, nickel-plated Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum between her thumb and forefinger. The steady click, click, click seemed thunderous in the silence of her office. It gave her conviction, and it gave her courage. She released the cylinder and folded it out from the weapon. She slid her hand into the shallow pocket of her jacket and pulled out 6 dull brass rounds, and one by one dropped them into the 6 chambers of the cylinder. She rotated the cylinder back into position, and her thumb eased back and found the crook of the revolver's hammer. It was harder than she expected to pull it back into position. The gun was heavy and the spring was tight, but with just a little effort, she heard the hammer click and lock into place. Maureen took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and thought of her life before all of this. She remembered being in law school, drinking after big exams with her friends. She remembered meeting her husband and going on long walks and talking about their future. She remembered getting a job in the SA's office, starting a real career in the law. She remembered the case that made her famous, that got her elected state's attorney. She remembered Gavin Gale. He had been a punk, a ruthless kid who showed no remorse for his actions. She had hated him from the moment she met him. Slightly under average height, but solid, strong. He was built like a brick shithouse and wore a permanent scowl under his soft, sandy curls. He had caught his girlfriend cheating and beat her up, and then killed the kid that she was with. Of course, he swore that's not what happened. He swore that he walked in on her being attacked. He came to her defense. They all say shit like that. But if it were true, she would have said so. She would have jumped to his defense. Of course she hadn't. She hadn't said anything. It was a slam dunk case, even for an assistant state's attorney like her. That was until the tape showed up. He had always said that there was a video, one of those small handheld camcorders with a fold-out screen. He said someone was recording the whole thing, but of course there was no such evidence. Then, the day of her closing statement, after spoon-feeding the jury her compelling and airtight case, she came back to her office, and there it was. It was in an envelope, delivered by U.S. mail. No note, no information on the sender, just a brown envelope with the tape inside. And on the tape, the video of Weather Rose being attacked and Gavin coming in and saving her. Maureen thought a lot about the tape that night. She thought about where it could have come from, why it just showed up, what it meant for the defense, and what it meant for her. For her it meant the most high-profile case she'd ever worked on was over. She wouldn't win it. It would crumble around her and be forgotten. Her name would stop showing up on TV and in the papers. The Tribune had called her a shoo-in for the next essay. For her, it meant hitting a brick wall at 1,000 miles an hour. For him, well, he was still the kind of kid that could beat someone to death with his bare hands. If he didn't go down now, he would eventually. Eventually, after someone else got hurt. She took the tape and slid it in her purse and zipped the pockets shut. That was that. She didn't think about it again until now. She jumped and her heart skipped. She very nearly let the gun she was holding in her lap go off. She was shaking a little and almost started to cry. She looked up and shook her body to regain composure. Maureen closed her eyes again and began to cry. She felt the heavy steel in her hands and thought about her life and her family. She slid her thumb back to the hammer and pulled back just slightly, eased the trigger back just a hair, and slowly guided the hammer softly back to her resting position, then set the gun down on her desk and leaned back in her chair and sobbed. She cried until she slept. When she woke up, it was dark. The clock on her wall, barely visible in the dim light cast by her desk lamp, read 1:38. She looked at her cell phone and saw 9 missed calls, 12 text messages, and 7 voicemail messages. She decided that it was too late to call home, but she sent her husband a text saying that she was sorry and she had fallen asleep at the office. She would be home soon and she would take the day off. She swiveled in her chair to face her desk and drew a set of keys from her purse. A small brass key in the middle slid neatly into a lock at the top right-hand drawer of her desk. She twisted it and pulled the drawer open. Deep inside, she retrieved the small, black plastic square. She turned it in her hands and remembered how she felt when she put Gavin away. She felt proud. She felt strong. She felt powerful. She gently set the evidence back in the desk, picked the gun up and slid it into the same drawer, then locked it again. She grabbed her phone, jacket, and hat and pushed her chair back in under her desk. Everything was going to be okay now. Now she knew what she had to do. That was chapter 4 of Dark White. It's kind of the turning point for Maureen. It's going to be the point where Maureen becomes who she is. Dark White is a lot about unintended consequences. It's a lot about the things we do that seem right at the time and end up being wrong. One of the things that is very common in a noir style thriller is a villain who is sympathetic. They're not evil. They're not twisting their handlebar mustaches and saying, ooh, how can I take over the world? They're doing what they think is right. We talk about this in writing a lot, that every character is the hero of their own story, that the villain should think what they're doing is the right thing. And Maureen's about to go down a road that she's going to regret. Thank you. If you enjoyed this, I definitely suggest subscribing. Subscribing helps me a lot. Certainly clicking the like button helps me a lot. And the other thing you can do to support me is buy my books. So Dark White, you can buy it and read along. It is available widely anywhere you buy books. Go into your local independent bookstore. If they don't have it on their shelf, they will be able to order it for you. Yeah, the ebook is also available widely. So if you you can even go to your library and request that they get a copy for you to check out. Malcolm Karma Cold Turkey is my new book. It's the follow-up to Dark White. It's not a direct sequel. It is more of an interconnected standalone, so it takes place in the same world as Dark White and Gavin Gale, and there are definitely some overlapping characters, some overlapping references, but you don't have to read Dark White to read Malcolm Karma Cold Turkey. Malcolm Karma Cold Turkey is also available widely. You can get it anywhere books are sold. The ebook is exclusive to Amazon right now, Amazon and Kindle, and I did that so that I can offer the ebook through Kindle Unlimited. So if you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, you can read Malcolm Karma Cold Turkey for free. Also, this version of Malcolm Karma Cold Turkey is the special edition. Okay, this is the dime store special edition, and it is a mass market paperback size. It fits in your back pocket of your jeans. It's got a matte cover that's all weathered, and the way you can get a hold of one of these is by going and subscribing to my Patreon, even my free Patreon, and that will give you access to a link to purchase the special edition. Every copy of the special edition is signed, and it is also hand numbered so that you have a very individualized copy. So yeah, you can buy that through my Patreon link, or you can buy the regular edition that is glossy 5x8 version like Dark White here. Anywhere. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it at your local bookstore. I also, like I said, if you just want to get it from the library, you can request your library get a copy, and then you can check it out at the library. Next week will be, the next video will be reading chapter 5. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.